One of the things I found reading the books, and of course watching the series, is I have a lot of friends who have children, and they struggle for months, on how to name one child. One child. And you, sir, have named thousands of people. Where does the inspiration for these names come from? Because there's the why. I mean, you've got the Jon Snow, and then you've got crazy exotic names as well. Where do you find all the inspiration for the names?
Names are very hard.
I bet.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, names are really, really hard. And I need to know the name of a character before I can write about them. I met a writer once. I won't mention her name. She was a very successful science fiction fantasy writer. But I remember years ago, I happened to be visiting her in her house, and it was so long ago. She was working on her IBM Selectric, so that gives you an idea of how long ago it was. Didn't have computers yet, and she was finishing a novel, and I noticed that there were like no names. There was like X13. X13 turned in. What, you named a character X13? She said, oh, no, I have a hard time with names, so I put them at the end. I have this list where I number all the characters, like A1, A2, A3, and then I write the book with that, and then when I'm done, I invent names for them and use the search, and, put X13 is Fred, and then Fred appears. And I can't write about Fred unless I know that his name was Fred. Knowing that he's Fred influences the whole way I write about him and so forth. So that method of working, different writers work different ways. That was completely alien for me. But one of the things about names, when you're a wee tiny little writer just starting out, one of the things they teach you is when you're writing a story, never give two characters in a story names that begin with the same letter, because the reader will confuse them. And I followed that rule for many years, but then when I was writing Ice and Fire, I said, wait a minute, I'm planning on having more than 26 characters. What am I going to do here? Am I going to name them like X-Fred? So I decided to ignore that rule. In fact, reading history, I decided to go even further. If it's bad to name two characters, give characters names that start with the same letter. Mm-hmm. It's really bad to give two characters in the same story the same name. So I looked at, reading English history, which was the inspiration for that. If you read English history, and you guys are Canadians, I presume you know a little of English history, everybody in it is named Edward and Henry. It's really, the history of England is a history of Edward and Henry. And occasionally Richard sneaks in and does a little mischief. But and somehow, yet we keep them, we attach numbers to them, we attach, secondary names, Edward of Woodstock, Henry of York or whatever, and we're able to distinguish one from the other with nicknames. And I said, I'm going to do that. That's much more realistic. I'm going to have these family names, and like many families I know in the real world, they'll be, I'm naming you after your grandmother, I'm naming you after your grandfather. There was this great king, and you want to curry favor, so of course you're going to name your child after the king. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to show all these naming patterns, and they all occur in the book, where you see, Robert comes to the throne, and a lot of children around the same time suddenly seem to have the name Robert in numerous families. But you also see families like the Starks, who keep having a Brandon every generation, every other generation. There's a Brandon of some sort, going back to their ancestor Bran the Builder. And the Lannisters, who always have the T-Y, Tywin, Tybalt, Tyrion, so forth. So the echoes of family names and family naming patterns. I also wanted to show the ethnic groups. So, I have successive waves of invasion that have hit Westeros in this backstory, if you read its history. And of course, they started out with the First Men, and the First Men tend to have very simple descriptive names like Stark, or Strong, or Mud, or, where they're named after something.
C-words.
And then the Andals come in, and their names are a little more elaborate, and they don't tend to be named after things. So like Lannister or Arryn, these are Andal names. And then, of course, you get the Valerians and the Targaryens coming in, who have the very exotic names with all the AEs and the Ys and the odd spellings, like Daenerys Targaryen. which was a pretty exotic name, I thought, and bespoke an exotic past that went well with the silver hair and the purple eyes and so forth. It is somewhat startling that I receive all these baby pictures on the email of little girls who are being named Daenerys, and you know, in a few more years, probably the first wave of them has already hit kindergarten by now, and there must be kindergarten teachers all over the United States and Canada cursing my name as they, no, you spell my name with an A-E and a Y at the end.